Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today on a gray, sleety Tag Tuesday, and amazingly, it's a tag that I was tagged in. Micah Cummins tagged me in the Finish the Book tag, which was created in the mists of prehistory by who knows who, but which has enjoyed a bit of a renaissance lately. Dozens of channels that I watch have been doing this tag. It's really neat. It's a really fun kind of procedural nosy tag, which is exactly the kind that I like. So I understand that a new generation of booktubers would pick it up again. And I checked, and I don't think I've ever done this. So I thought I would do it now. If I am duplicating it from eons past, well, we'll see how my answers compare. I'd like to think that they would line up. Question number one is: do you keep a list of the books you read? This is all about your process of being a reader. And over the years, over my 28 years, I have kept lots of lists. I have once upon a time had a reading journal. I've had reading account books many, many times. Big leather-bound things, spiral-bound things that had elaborate organization, or as elaborate as I get, where I read about 15 or 16 genres, and I would make dividers. I actually went to the stationery store and got plastic multicolored dividers for these big inventory books. I'd put them in there so that I knew at a glance. They had tabs. I could tell where the category was, so that when I finished a book, I could go straight there and make notations about it. What it was, where I got it, when I read it, where I read it, and a little bit about what I thought about it. Uh, I've had books like that many, many times in my life until just comparatively recently. I've kept book journals separate from my regular diary, and I have had those in forms, all kinds of forms, all over the place, all over the years. There are plenty of them in this room from previous years. And I also had for a long time, about 2 years, I had a online spreadsheet that Sam, the old BookTube channel, Sam's Novels and Nonsense, made for me. She made a foolproof. She made a really good spreadsheet for me, sent it to me, and it had so many bells and whistles I couldn't even understand it. I said, "Could you foolproof this?" And she did. She made a very basic spreadsheet that I dutifully filled in for a while. The problem with the spreadsheet was the same problem as it was with the book journals and the book diaries and the book ledgers, which is that I dutifully filled them in, but I never looked at them again. I certainly never consulted them for anything. And the one or two times that I thought, you really should go through here, like, for instance, you just got a new biography of Mary Baker Eddy. You read the last one. So you should find it in your book journal and refresh your memory. An example like that, it doesn't have to be that particular book, but an example like that, I would tell myself that every once in a while. I would feel a little guilty, and I would tell myself, you should do that. And I would take out whatever book journal I was using or go to whatever spreadsheet I was using. And as I was making my way to finding the book, which was never all that easy to do, in my mind I would be thinking, well, I'm going to compare this experience against what I'm remembering about the book. I remember that I finished it on, a rainy day in Paris, that I was surrounded by dogs. I remember each one of them. I remember that I didn't particularly like it. I thought it was drastically overwritten, and I thought that it did not critically examine the underpinning assumptions by which Mary Baker Eddy lived her life, and that a biographer's duty is to do that. It, a biographer's duty is in part, with a figure like her, to assess whether or not she was delusional. You're not making any kind of an assessment of the validity or lack thereof of her religion, but you want to know when she started to hear voices, and to what extent that was true, and that the author doesn't do that. In other words, that the biography was overlong and reverential, which it should not be. And I'm thinking all that while I'm paging, trying to find where it was. Then I find it, and it's all of that. It's all of that, which I didn't need to go to the book to do. And of course, there were lapses. There are many times where I've bought a book, for instance, that I already own. But I increasingly found as time went on, culminating in those electronic spreadsheets, that I didn't need these things. The extent to which I uh, just organically remember the details of what I read and when I read and what I thought about it is good enough for me. now. So I don't keep anything like that anymore. I don't keep a list of any content anymore. I don't, for instance, like so many people answering this tag nowadays in 2023, so many people are saying that they use Goodreads, the site Goodreads, for that. They use the site as a list and an annotated record of what they read and when and where and how. I certainly don't use Goodreads for that. I very lamentably, this is like the 5th year in a row where I have sworn to myself that I'd make better use of Goodreads, and this is the 5th year in a row where, at least so far, I'm failing to do that, and that's wrong. That is not. I am not meaning that to be snobbery. That's just laziness on my part. I need to make better use of Goodreads, but I can't imagine using someone else's site that could go belly up tomorrow to record that kind of information if it was important to me. And every once in a while, I will when I'm rearranging or cleaning things here, I will find one of those big old timey leather journals full of notes of reading past. And every once in a while, when I see that, I'll think, well, maybe you ought to re-adopt this. But not for the action of it, not for the silly romanticism of it. I didn't use it. That's the key. And you have to, and as far as I'm concerned, I would have to use it to justify the energy of upkeeping it. And I didn't use it. And now maybe you could say posterity might use it. I suppose I don't really care about posterity, and they don't care about me. But so the answer to this question, the short answer, which I don't think is going to feature, I don't think short answers are going to feature in this tag, is no. I don't keep a list of any kind. I trust my memory, and it usually doesn't let me down. Especially as to what I thought about a book, which is the main key for why I would keep such a thing, is to refresh my memory on impressions, reactions, that sort of thing. It turns out, at least to an extent that satisfies me, I don't need to refresh my memory on those things. So, and for the colorful atmospheric details that I might want to remember, where I was sitting, what my bill was at the table, which specific dogs were with me, I find that my journal is good enough for that, and also my memory is good enough for that. So, no, I don't keep a list of any kind. That was only question 1. Let's move on. See if we can move through the rest of these faster. Question number 2 is, what stats do you record for your reading? And because this is 2023 and a great number of readers that I know of, including a stubbornly persistent large percentage of BookTube, have turned their entire personal reading, all of the reading that they do for pleasure, into one enormously extended apology tour for bigotry they don't possess, for blind spots that they don't have, for insane racism and sexism that they don't have. It's not in them. They're good, perfectly moral, conscientious people. But instead of just accepting that and moving on to help the world and fix it in ways that they can, they've decided that they themselves are the nadirs of all evil. And so their reading has become an hugely extended apology tour. I don't care. I didn't care for the last 60 novels that I read from East Timor, but if I don't read 61, I'm a bigot, and I want to apologize for being a bigot against the Timorese since now. So I'm going to keep doing that. It's rendered my reading an utterly joyless exercise in demographic census taking, but I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to virtue signal and posture about it. So in 2023, there are a huge number of stats for readers to keep, a huge number. And most of the most ardent stats keepers that I have seen, unless they're spreadsheet wonks like Olive, most of the ardent stats that I have seen are being kept as a kind of apology by people who have been convinced by Twitter that they are rampant racists, or rampant sexists, or unapologetic imperialists. I want to ask some of these booktubers, when's the last time you ransacked a country? I don't think you ever have. I think you probably mentioned that in your booktube newbie tag if you'd ransacked East Angola last week. It's all ridiculous. And those kinds of stats I absolutely do not keep. I absolutely am not interested in keeping. Of course, you don't keep these stats. You keep them publicly. There's absolutely no point to any of the virtue signalists that I'm thinking of. There would be absolutely no point to them noting how many non-binary Samoans confined to wheelchairs they have read in the last year, because if you don't, yikes, read the room. Not a good look, so you hate those people. They're not just keeping track of how many of those novels they've read. they wouldn't do that privately. They're only doing it because there's a public element. And I don't do anything like that at all, not in the slightest. I am trusting to the poisson distribution field of the new release market. I am trusting that my reading will have plenty of variety. And I'm not interested in introducing more of it if the introduction of that more is performative or apologetic. And it is, in all the cases that I've seen, it is. So I don't keep any stats like that. The only stat that I keep is how many books I read in any year. Now that's just fun for me. That doesn't mean anything, but it is fun for me. It's fun for me every year to see if I can best last year's total. The total number of books that I read in that year. For instance, today, as of this morning, as of the making of this video, I've read 169 books in 2023. I have a goal in mind for 2023. I think I can reach it. One goal is certainly to reach the same number of books that I read last year. But I also want to exceed it, and I know exactly how many I want to exceed it by. And I'm confident that if I just keep reading at the rate that I'm loving, I will do it. But that's the number of books in a year is the only stat that I keep. Then question number 3 is, do you give star ratings? And I don't, because books aren't toasters. And star ratings are lazy and reductive. There's no way to save them. There's no way to legitimately defend them. They are awful. They are Siskel and Ebert type thumbs up, thumbs down, emoticon reactions to things that at least we're saying are a complex personal experience. Well, would you give a star rating to any other complex personal experience in your life? I don't think you would. I've never seen anybody do it. And also, star ratings are inherently useless. What is their meaning? If a star rating can only be explained on Goodreads if you also read the author's 5,000-word manifesto on what their star ratings mean, then what good are they? No. I want to know what people thought about a book, which involves reading. I know it sounds so horrible. It's so much work. I want to know what they thought about a book. I want to know about the shadings, the nuance, the give and take. I don't want a star. A star doesn't tell me anything. And naturally, I object to them in terms of me profession as well. Naturally, I do. What are any book critics doing if stars have any value at all? They don't have any value at all. So no, I don't give star ratings. And question number 4 is, do you review books? And I have been known to do that. Yes, I have reviewed a great many books for a great many different audiences in a large number of different venues. I love it. Absolutely love it. It is, in fact, my profession. I love doing it. Love sinking my teeth into a good book review. It's only the ones that are programmatic, whether it's because the editor wants it to be that way or because the book is noteworthy and there's no way to note it except to give it a kind of review. Those are soul-sucking. I admit, I have written my share of those reviews, and they are soul-sucking. Once upon a time, literary journals used to get around that. Literary journals like the TLS, for instance, used to get around that by, in every issue, having a little section where they mention the books that they've received in the mail. And that's all. And they figure, all right, well, we've used our venue, our platform, our audience, to at least make them aware of these books. But that is a far cry from saying they're worth a review. Other venues have gone a little further and said new and noteworthy. Because if it's new, it is noteworthy, at least in a bare bones kind of way. And again, thought, well, okay, if we put 24 books in new and noteworthy, then we're done. That's the most of our obligation. We don't have to worry about reviewing it. Not every book is worth a passionate review. I have written my share of passionless reviews. They are a little bit deadening, but nevertheless, I still love the activity. Absolutely love it. Question number 5 is, where do you put your finished books? This is actually a fascinating question for me. I've noticed a lot of people doing this tag saying, I just put them on the shelf. I don't think anything of it. And that, a lot of times, I think that answer goes hand in hand with the fact that most people are reading what I reflexively refer to as backstock, which is really bad. It sounds dismissive, and I don't mean it to. But I read mostly new releases in the American book market. And most people don't. I'm perfectly aware of that. Most people don't. Most people First of all, most people have hundreds of unread books on their shelves, and most of those books are older. They were picked up for one reason or another. Maybe something was hot one year and you'll get around to it someday, or maybe you heard somebody talk about it, so you get a copy and you put it on your shelf. Those things don't apply to me. Most of the books that I have on my shelf are read, often reread, especially in this little room. Uh, and most of the books that I read are new releases, either ebooks or printed copies. And with them, there is an active question of where I put them when I'm finished with them. Because where I get them from, let's stick with the printed books for now. There's a whole bookcase, gigantic bookcase full of new and forthcoming books that I am going to read and consider for review. And they're organized. Those shelves are organized by month. Each shelf is a month. And then within the month, they're organized left to right by date of the month. So that if I'm going to write a scathing review of a book I don't want to write a scathing review of a book that comes out on the 30th of March, on the 1st of March. That's not fair. That means I'm ripping to shreds a book that no one can even look at for a month, effectively. I don't want to do that. So I organize the books by week release as well, which means that when I pull a book off that shelf, and read it and take notes and maybe review it, it can't go back on that shelf. It's done. It's not on that shelf anymore. It's not an unread book. So then there is the question of what I do with it. Where does it go? And that involves a whole bunch of mental calculus. I finished the book. First of all, if it's an advanced copy, one of those, I don't think I have one right here, but a paperback, an advanced reader's copy, a review copy, not the sort of thing you would see in a bookstore, not a finished copy. If it's something like that, I'm probably not going to want to keep it anyway. I'm going to want to wait for the finished copy. But the mental calculus involves, first of all, do I want to keep this book? I've reviewed it. That's why I asked for it. That's why I got it. And that's what my readers want. They don't care whether I'm keeping it or not. Do I want to keep it, or do I want to get rid of it? That's question number one. If I want to keep it, well, then that opens up a whole bunch of other questions. Where do I want to keep it? For instance, is it a very, very rare example of a new release that I get in finished copy, I write about it, and it is coming in here? This, for those of you who don't know, is my little book room. And the books that are in here are my favorite books. They are the ones that I cannot really see myself not having. There are plenty of other shelves in Hyde Cottage full of books, but this is special. This is my sanctum sanctorum. Every once in a blue moon, a brand new book will just announce itself as something that belongs in here. That does happen, but it's very, very rare. Instead, usually it's going to be, where else is it going to go? So if I finish with it and I think, okay, I want to keep this. This was noticeably good, noticeably different. It affected me. I want to keep this. Okay, well, then it's got to go somewhere. Once upon a time, for years, I would put it in its respective section. I had a bookcase for science fiction and fantasy, had a bookcase for history, had a bookcase for biography. I would just put it in there. Lately, I've taken to a different approach, which is towards the end of every year, I clear off an entire bookcase and leave it that way until the new year starts, and slowly fill that with that year's books. With the idea being that when the year is done, I will have, there'll be attrition from those books. I'll look at them, 2 months down the line and think, okay, I don't know why I kept you. You're a completely pro forma thriller. I don't need to keep you. So despite the fact that you're new, or relatively new, despite the fact that you're not in paperback yet, I'm going to get rid of you. Through that process of winnowing, at the end of the year, I will have a collection of the most noteworthy books that I wanted to keep from that year. That happened in 2022. I did that in 2022. And I now have that's about a shelf and a half of those books. And I'm going to do that again for 2023. I've cleared a whole bookcase, because you want it to expand and contract. You're not 100% sure. Time needs to play a factor in this. So I'm going to fill that bookcase with 2023 releases. Now, some of them are easy to tell. Some of them have already been widowed, but not all of them. Not all of them. There'll be a lot of biographies that'll stay in there for the whole of the year, a lot of novels that'll stay in there for the whole of the year. I'm going to take pictures and keep a record of what that shelf looks like throughout the year, and then at the end of the year. So that, though that kind of calculus enters into where I store books, where I keep them. It's different with secondhand books that I get from the Brattle Bookshop. it's different there because there's, with new releases, most of it is going to be ephemeral. Most of it I'm not going to want to keep. I might keep it for a few months, but I'm not going to want to keep it forever. Whereas I'd like to think, certainly I try at the Brattle and other places not to hoover up just anything. There'll be attrition. A lot of that stuff will end up going back into the book recycling cycle, but a lot of it I would hope would come in here to this book room. And that's what happens if I'm keeping a book. By far the majority of the books that I get, I don't keep. And that involves you. That involves people who just email me and say, you held up that book. I really want it, but I don't have any way to get it. If only there were a way. And I fall for it. I pop it in an envelope and I mail it to you. But anyway, that's largely what I do with finished books. If it's an older release, I'm really hoping that it makes its way in here. I don't need my 50th biography of Abraham Lincoln. I might get one for $1 at the Brattle, read it and enjoy it. But if it's not truly outstanding, if it's not a Lincoln biography or Byron biography or whatever that I really want to keep, I will get rid of it. So as people have pointed out over the last few decades, I use the Brattle Bookshop, for instance, their $1 sale lot, as a kind of slow motion pay-as-you-go library. Because if I get 10 books at the Brattle sale lot for $10, I'm not obliged to return any of them. If I could keep them all if I like them, and that's a nice feeling. But anyway, question number, where are we here? 6. How do you pick your next book? Again, most of the books that I read are new releases in the 15 or 16 genres that genuinely interest me in the American book market. And I get those and prop them up on a new bookcase. Or I keep a folder on my laptop's desktop of PDFs and book files and whatnot if I only have it electronically. I try not to do that because I still think that the majority of my readers will encounter these things in paper and print form. And so as a reviewer, I should be experiencing that paper and print form if I'm going to write about the book. So the bulk of them are not. The bulk of them are in one particular section. And I like the experience of simple serendipity when it comes to picking the next one. I organize these things by month and then by week. And what I like to do is just go through just in a straight line left to right. That's all. I like that mainly because it's a firebreak against a pernicious habit of readers and also reviewers gradually shaping their reading so that they're only reading stuff they know they're going to like. Gradually eliminating surprises at all. And gradually limiting the flexibility of an open mind. I don't like to do that. I don't want that to be true for me. So I generally let pure publication chance choose the next book that I will pick. Then question number 7 is, do you have any rituals for when you finish a book? And I actually do. I thought about this. A lot of people, some of the people that I know have rather elaborate rituals. I do. A wag, a cynic could say that one of my rituals when I finish a book is writing a review somewhere. I don't review every book I read, though, so that's not fair. But I was thinking about this, and I do have a ritual for when I finish a book. And it's a little odd. It's purely internal. It doesn't have any kind of notebook or scented candle or anything like that. It's purely internal. But when I was thinking about this question, I realized that I do it all the time. I do it with every book, even if the book is completely trivial. Taken by the T-Rex, for instance. Which is when I'm finished with a book, I do a kind of deep mental breath. Just sometimes I can put my head back on the pillow. I'll say, okay, you're finished. What was that book? How do you feel right now about the whole experience of finishing this thing? What was that? Now, that's not the same thing as down the line assessing it critically. That's just, okay, you took this in, cement it. What was it? Don't fly on to the next thing. Take a deep mental breath and appreciate the fact that you have just consumed this thing. I don't know if I'm describing it right. Probably I'm not. I don't know. I really only started thinking about it because of this question, but I do it with every book. Where when I pause, when I finish it, either I'm turning the last page if I'm doing an old-timey kind of book, or I'm finished with it. I'm finished with the ebook. There is a moment, a pause, a few minutes of just, I don't even want to say assessing, more like just appreciating the whole of this thing. I'm not starting it anymore. I'm not reading it anymore. I finished it. What was that? What was that I did? Uh, I'm not describing it well, but it really helps. It really does. It really is. It helps to clear the decks. It really is just a clean breath before I move on to the next book. And that is it. That is the finish the book tag. Aside from the duty of tagging people, that's prompt number 8. But I don't know who to tag because this tag is not only is it going around, so everybody is doing it or has done it, but also it's very old. So lots of people, lots of booktubers who've been at this for a long time who I watch will have already done this. So I'm going to take the same route that I saw so many other people take. Aaron Faso is, I think, one of the most recent ones I saw do it, which is just a blanket tag. If you haven't done this, this is definitely the sort of thing I want to know about for you as a reader. I don't know how clear I was on any of my answers. You'll be a lot clearer. I want to know those answers. So if you have not done this tag, old or new, you should do it. This is fascinating. And, your answers could be different next year. I wonder how many of mine would be. But I think I'm going to steadfastly refuse to go back to those old leather reading journals. I think I'm going to do that. I don't consult them. And that would be the whole point of them. What kind of a waste of time are they otherwise? They can't be for cementing important details so that I don't forget them, because I don't forget those details, whether I cement them or not. And it can't be for consultation if I never go back and consult them. So I'm going to resist that temptation. Merely talking about them has made me want to. I've got one pictured in my mind that's just waiting. It's all ready. I could just pick it up again and just continue with the next books that I get. I'm not going to do that, though. So anyway, I want to thank Micah for tagging me despite my smell and despite the fact that I am an outcast, a pariah, a leper on BookTube. And I want to urge any of you who have not done this to do this. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.